Welcome to Politicus, the only podcast that discusses politics and public service from the Portuguese-American perspective. Here we discuss everything from federal policy, local issues, and U.S.-Portugal relations with the goal of driving more discussion and awareness of the issues affecting our nation, our community, and what we as Portuguese-Americans can do about it. And now, Politicus. Welcome, everybody, to Politicus. This is our very first episode, and it's a podcast hosted by PALCUS, where we will be talking about politics from a Portuguese-American perspective. And I'd like to welcome my co-host, Diniz Borges. Welcome, Diniz.
Thank you, Angela. It's great to be here. This is exciting for the Portuguese-American community and for all of those who like politics in the United States.
Right. And I think even if you don't like politics, you can't help but avoid it right now. Would you say that's the case? It's just everywhere you go, everybody's talking about it. I was listening to another podcast actually earlier this week that was saying whether you like or dislike what's happening in our political system right now, one silver lining is that the level of civic engagement and political engagement from the community, from regular people, has increased more so in the recent months than any other time in recent history. So it's great to see people paying attention and wanting to do something.
Correct. And I think the Portuguese-American community has been silenced in many aspects for too long. We have an enormous Portuguese-American presence in the political world. We are present in many school boards. We're present in many local elections, such as city council, supervisor roles for the states who have the various counties and that role. And obviously at the statewide level and even at the national level. And at times we haven't done a pretty good inventory of those. And so now I think it's a time to, through Politicus, to do that inventory and give these folks a voice. And at the same time, find new voices in the Portuguese-American community. Voices such was recently found at the CPAC, California Portuguese-American Coalition Summit in Sacramento, like Cecilia Aguiar Curry, who through our community outreach said, yes, I'm a Portuguese background, and I'm so very proud of it, and I want to work with the Portuguese-American community and find issues that, although I do not have many folks of Portuguese-American background in my area, I do want to find issues that are relevant statewide to the Portuguese-American community, and I'd like to work on it. So I think this is an exciting time building upon this need for a much larger grassroots movement throughout the different spheres of the political spectrum, that we get folks involved, and Portuguese-Americans have contributed immensely throughout the United States of America, throughout the history of this great country, that it is time that we also have this voice through. And I think Politicus and PALCUS can be and has been, PALCUS has been, a very important voice for the national political world in the Portuguese community. But I think the podcast can certainly help that.
Right. And I mean, and as you mentioned, it'll give us a chance to talk to a lot of different folks at different levels, right? Because being politically active doesn't mean you're just in the state assembly or a congressman. It's the school boards, it's the water commissions, it's the planning commissions, it's the being appointed to other different positions. And, you know, I don't know that people necessarily always think of it that way. Or when they think of, I don't want to run for office, I don't want to run for city council. Well, you don't have to run for city council. There's a lot of other things you can do. And hearing people's stories about how they get involved and are in these different positions, I think will be really inspiring for our community, and maybe and hopefully encourage some folks to start considering, you know,
Correct.
becoming active and running for office or getting into one of those positions. So I'm really excited to hear their stories. We heard some of them at the CPAC Summit. And what I loved was that they all had a different story as to how they got involved, right? It wasn't they were a poli-sci major in college, or they were part of the Young Democrats or Young Republicans in high school. In fact, I don't know that any of them were. You know, Scott Silveira from Los Banos said that at eight years old, he was inspired by some folks that he met. And Craig Peterson from Kings County, talking about he was a farmer and there was an issue that he wanted to resolve. So that's how he started getting involved. And so it was just, you know, everybody gets involved usually because they either want to make a difference or there was a specific issue that was important to them that you know, prompted them to get involved. And in today's world, whether it's, you know, Portuguese language, whether it's education, you know, funding and education period, for going to college, because my gosh, I don't think I can afford $60,000 today, let alone in 10 years or 12 years when Aurelia is ready to go to college, $100,000 per year for tuition, or whether it's the environment, or, I mean, there's just so many things that affect us. Just us being Portuguese American doesn't make us immune to those things. So a lot of things that will affect us.
Correct. And I think the podcast can serve as an impetus to that discussion, that debate, and as a forum. We've done an excellent job in the Portuguese-American communities as far as integrating, as far as keeping our culture alive, although, there's dilemmas and there are challenges, as there will always be, because culture is not a static thing. It's something that there's evolution to it on a daily basis. And so we have done an outstanding job. We have, some of the most awesome celebrations and festivals and festas throughout the year, both in the East Coast, in California, and anywhere there's Portuguese Americans, including in Idaho and some other states. However, we have also become involved in the Portuguese American arena, as far as the political arena, but sometimes not as vocal as we should be. We're there, but sometimes we don't know. Many people in the community don't even know that we are there. And as you mentioned, and as it was said, by a famous politician, all politics is local. And so folks do not have to have any aspirations. And although it would be very interesting to have more and more Portuguese Americans with those aspirations of running for Congress or for the presidency of the United States of America. However, there is lots of decisions, or many, many decisions that affect people's lives on a daily basis, that are made in the planning commissions, in the parks and recreation commissions, that are made in the school boards, that are made on an everyday basis, whether you have a park close to your house that you can go and walk, or your family can walk, or your elderly loved one can go to a nursing home that is close by and safe, and everything else. All of these are guided by commissions, by public nominated or elected officials. And so it's important that we have a voice and that we are present in these local aspects. And hopefully through Politicus, we can discover even more Portuguese Americans who are serving in different aspects of our communities, and some who are in areas that there aren't even very large Portuguese American communities, but they're there, and it's an important voice to have present.
Right. No, absolutely. And so I would have a call to our listeners that if you are interested in these topics, if you have thoughts, you have suggestions, you have questions, even if they're tough, because I think also on Politicus, we should tackle the tough topics, right? The things that no one wants to talk about, because they have to be talked about. If it's a problem, whether it's specific to the Portuguese American community or it's a nationwide issue, we have to talk about those tough issues. And so we hope to talk about those here. So to our listeners, we really, really want to hear from you. We want your suggestions. We would like your ideas, your feedback. We want this podcast to be your podcast so that we are addressing the issues that are most important to you, and hopefully helping to solve some of those challenges through discussion and through action. So with that, I think we're both excited. I know that we talked to a lot of the elected officials at the CPAC Summit. They were excited to participate. And we're just going to start one by one, getting their stories and getting their thoughts and tackling some of those issues, getting our peoples more involved.
Correct. And we can never remember enough that it's very important that folks get involved and also that folks participate. And hopefully you'll listen to the podcast. Hopefully you'll pass it on through social media and through word of mouth to your friends in the Portuguese American community, and not just your friends in the Portuguese American community. We need Politicus to be a voice for the Portuguese American community and other communities as well, whether our heritage is Portuguese or not, whether our first language was Portuguese or not. We all communicate most of us communicate more in English than any other language, whether we speak Portuguese, Spanish, or French, or any other language as a second language. The language that unifies us here in the United States of America is English. Podcasts will be in English. And so it is important that we live them in the Portuguese American community, but it is also important that we share them and share these podcasts with other ethnic groups, with other folks who sometimes don't know that we are such an important force in the Portuguese America, in the American mainstream world. So please participate, as Angela said. Please give us ideas, suggestions. Please, if you are in a state, in an area that is non-traditionally a Portuguese community present, but you know of someone there that is present, let us know, and especially if there are any tough issues, because sometimes we shy away from the tough issues, and we shouldn't, as Angela said, because they also affect Portuguese-American lives like they affect everyone else.
Yep, that's an excellent point. So listeners, click subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, whether it's iTunes or SoundCloud or Stitcher or wherever it is. Click subscribe, click share, and share the podcast with your friends, family, colleagues. As Diniz mentioned, Portuguese, non-Portuguese, please share it with everybody. And we look forward to hearing from you, and look forward to doing this with you, Diniz, and talking to so many people. So I'm really excited. So thanks for doing this.
This is going to be fun.
It is going to be fun and interesting and thought-provoking and all those things. So thanks, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoy the podcast, and we look forward to hearing from you. So until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Politicus, the official podcast of PALCUS, the Portuguese-American Leadership Council of the United States. PALCUS is the premier national organization representing the interests of the Portuguese-American community at large. To learn more about PALCUS and how to become a member or to make a donation, visit www.palcus.org. To submit feedback or suggestions about the podcast, email us at palcus@palcus.org. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests of the show are not endorsed by PALCUS.